Hi, I'm Laura Carucci. I'm the court reporter here for Michelle tonight.
Hi, Laura. Good to see you this evening.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Madam Secretary, are you ready?
1 second, please.
Sure.
I am ready. Let's go.
All right. Good evening, everyone. We're going to call to order this regularly scheduled meeting for the City of Orange Township Planning Board for today, December 18th, 2024, the last one of the year 2024. I'm going to ask that everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. With that, Madam Secretary, have we met the Sunshine Law?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, in accordance with Chapter 231, Section 5 of the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act, notice of this remote public meeting of the Planning Board of the City of Orange Township was filed with the municipal clerk of the City of Orange Township, posted on the city's bulletin board designated for that purpose and on all official city website, as well as mailed to the city official newspaper as provided by ordinance.
Thank you. Can you take attendance, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Member Foston?
Present.
Member Aniuke?
Present.
Member Mobley?
Present.
Member Latour?
Present.
Council Vice President Eason?
Present.
Mayor Warren? Not present. Vice Chair Jones?
Here.
Chairman Holmes?
Present.
Quorum has been met.
Thank you. Is there any correspondence at this time?
There are no correspondence at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So the first item on the agenda is the adoption of the August 28, 2024 meeting minutes. And that was included in either your package or on the Dropbox. So give me 1 minute.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes, ma'am.
for this minutes, Vice Chair Jones wasn't present, but if she reviewed, she can memorialize. Take that back.
Okay. So I'm going to ask for a motion on the minutes for the August 28th meeting.
Motion.
We have a motion from Member Mobley. Is there a second?
Second.
Second for Councilwoman Eason. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none. Madam Secretary?
Member Foston?
Yes.
Member Aniuke?
Yes.
Member Mobley?
Yes.
Member Latour?
Yes.
Council Vice President Eason?
Yes.
Vice Chair Jones?
Same.
Vice Chair Jones,
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
okay, that's better. Yes.
Same.
Abstained. All right. Chairman Holmes?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next, the adoption of the September 18th, 2024 meeting minutes. Is there, okay, Madam Secretary, who's available?
Member Foston was not present and Mayor Warren was not present for these minutes.
Okay. So,
Motion to adopt.
motion from
Second.
Vice Chair, I'm sorry, from Council Vice President Eason, and a second from Member Mobley. Any questions on the motion? Madam Secretary?
Member Foston?
I wasn't present.
You could abstain. I just need a response.
Okay, yes.
Thank you. Member Anuké,
Yes.
Member Mobley,
Yes.
Member Latour,
Yes.
Council Vice President Eason,
Yes.
Vice Chair Jones. Now you're muted.
Yes. Sorry.
Chairman Holmes,
Yes,
motion passes.
thank you. Next, we have the adoption of the September 25th, 2024 meeting minutes.
In this minutes, Mr. Chairman, Member Boston was not present, Member Mobley was not present, and Mayor Warren was not present.
With
And
that, oh, go ahead.
1 second, Mr. Chairman.
Mhm.
Before we move forward, Mayor Warren, I did see him join.
Good afternoon.
Hey, good evening, Your Honor. Okay, let the record show that at 7:38, Mayor Warren is present for the meeting.
Can I proceed?
Yes, ma'am.
Member Foston,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
No.
We never got a motion or a second, so you were telling us who was available
I'm
to,
sorry, I moved fast.
Are we on the motion to adopt?
no, Madam Secretary is sharing with us who's available to vote on this and
Okay.
who's present at this meeting.
In this minutes, Member Foston was not present, Member Mobley was not present, and Mayor Warren was not present.
Okay, so now I will entertain a motion for the minutes.
Motion to adopt.
Motion from Councilwoman Eason. Is there a second? Second from Member Latour. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, Madam Secretary?
Member Foston,
Yes.
Member Anuké,
Yes.
Member Mobley,
Abstain.
Member Latour,
Yes.
Council Vice President Eason,
Yes.
Mayor Warren,
You said I couldn't vote on that, right?
you cannot.
You have to abstain, Mayor.
Abstain. Thank you for your
Vice Chair
guidance,
Jones?
Member Eason.
Vice Chair Jones,
Yes.
Chairman Holmes,
Yes,
motion passes.
thank you. Are there minutes for the October 23rd, 2024 meeting?
Those minutes will be memorialized at the January, where am I? 22nd meeting.
All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is to memorialize the resolution for case number 24-10. Simrick Orange JV LLC. That's 205 South Essex Avenue. That's a preliminary and final major site plan approval.
In this resolution, Mr. Chairman, Member Foston abstained.
So everyone had an opportunity. So is there a motion for this memorialization?
Motion.
I have a motion from Member Mobley,
Second.
a second from Councilwoman Eason. Are there any questions on the motion? Madam Secretary?
1 second, please. Member Foston,
Abstain.
Member Anuké,
Yes.
Member Mobley,
Yes.
Member Latour,
Yes.
Council Vice President Eaton,
Yes.
Mayor Warren,
Yes.
Vice Chair Jones,
Yes.
Chairman Holmes,
Yes,
motion passes.
thank you very much. So the case on our agenda for tonight is
Sorry.
case number 24-11. Vita, I'm sorry, Capital LLC. That's 538-544 Nassau Street. It's a preliminary and a final major site plan approval or application.
Attorney Jenkins is here on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Chairman.
Trying to find. Good evening, Attorney Jenkins. Unmute yourself, please, sir. We love to see the face. We love to hear the voice better.
There we go.
Good evening, sir.
I was going to say my wife says the opposite, unfortunately. No, anyway, good evening. Again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Reggie Jenkins, Trank Isabel, Siddiqui and Shadanian on behalf of the applicant Vita Capital LLC. So I'll just go right into this. The applicant is the contract purchaser with respect to the 10 separate parcels that make up this overall project site. The entirety of the property is located within the city's Central Valley Redevelopment Plan area. The project site is going to be composed of two parcels, what we'll call Site A and Site B, and those have been identified in the application package and has been well discussed in your planner's planning report. But in summary, what the applicant is proposing is the demolition of the existing structures, commercial structures on the property, specifically Site A. And on the larger lot, it's a 7-story residential building, and the other is going to be a 6-story multi-family building on the two distinct sites for a total of 174 residential units. With that, 175 on-site parking spaces are provided. And again, just by way of breaking it down, for Site A, that's going to have 122 residential dwelling units with 115 parking spaces on that site. With regard to Site B, we're proposing 52 residential units and 60 on-site ground parking spaces. Once done, the lots will be consolidated on the respective those two lots. So, the smaller ones will be consolidated on the one, the larger will be consolidated into one lot on the others. But this is being proposed holistically as one project. So the two sites compose one project. And by doing so, we derive the benefits that are available within the redevelopment plan. It is important to note that this is a permitted use in this redevelopment plan. But in addition to being a permitted use, we are compliant with regard to parking. We're compliant with regard to height. We are compliant with regard to the density. We're compliant in the total floor area ratio. We're also compliant in the total aspect of density. And the reason I point those out in particular is we have, in addition to the relief we're seeking for preliminary and final site plan approval, but there are a number of deviations we're seeking with regard to the building's dimensions, specifically with regard to the setbacks, the rear yards, and side yard, to state that in the summary fashion. The reason it's important to understand the compliance components of this is because one of the reasons we are without the setbacks that are compliant within the redevelopment plan is that as the board knows, the city amended its parking requirements. And so now there is a heightened parking requirement from when I think this project was first contemplated. That leads us in part to requiring some additional space within the first floor parking areas. And so some of the build out of this building is to accommodate the parking that is being proposed. In addition to, and also in addition to the residential units, we're going to have amenity space. We're going to have lounge space, and there's an open area on the rooftop. So I won't go through each one of the points of relief that we're seeking. We'll go through that in the direct testimony. But ultimately, I hope you will see that what is being proposed here is going to be harmonious and consistent with the development that has already happened in in this area so far, and that it is going to fit well and be yet another good addition to the city's redevelopment and development overall. So, Mr. Chairman, if you have no questions of me or the board at this time, I would like to call up our first witness. And by way of logistics, we have 3 witnesses in total. We have our architect, we have our engineer, and to the extent there's any backup questions, we have the representative of the applicant, Shirley Del Rosario, who can answer any questions that may come up from the board or the public.
Well, I have no questions, so you can proceed.
All right. The first awesome professional that I would like to bring up is Anthony D'Augusta from Inglace.
Okay. Okay, there you are, Anthony.
Hey.
Anthony, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth for this planning board tonight?
I do.
Okay, can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Sure. Anthony D'Augusta, ANTHONY, D'Augusta.
Okay, and Mr. Jenkins, if we can get Mr. D'Augusta's qualifications on briefly.
Absolutely. Mr. D'Augusta, can you provide the board with your current position and professional background, please?
Sure. I am partner at Inglace Architecture and Engineering. We're handling both the architecture and engineering on this project. I am a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey and the state of New York. I've been before this board before, thankfully, and my license is in current standing.
Good evening, Mr. D'Augusta. It's good to see you again. This board will accept you as an expert in architect, and your testimony is going to be limited to that as an architect, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you very
Sure.
much. So, Mr. D'Augusta, can you, from an architectural standpoint, can you describe, what you and your office have prepared and in support of this application, and then just walk us through the application from an architectural standpoint, please?
Absolutely. It's good to be back. Thanks for having us. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. May the host grant permission, please.
Try again,
All
please.
right. Got it. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Again, thanks for having us back. As Reggie always does, I provided an excellent summary of what's going to be proposed for these 2 sites. I'll give
Go on.
a quick overview. Well, I'm not calling you Mr. Jenkins. I'm calling you Reggie. You keep calling me Mr. D'Augusta. I'm looking for my father. But in this case, we are looking at 2 shared sites across the street from one another at Jefferson and Nassau. I think affectionately known as the Libretti site for quite some time. The former Libretti's restaurant occupied a portion of the site, as parking lot occupied the other half. And in general, we're proposing 2 6-story buildings. Those 2 buildings are respectively Site A and Site B, and we'll get into their density and general bulk requirements with a bit more care. But by and large, what we're looking at are two sister buildings across one another. Architecture is handled very similarly across both buildings. Detail and design was shared both with the city and with our development team to prepare a design that was, as Reggie mentioned, in context with the general development throughout the city, and we're happy to share it with you. As I am the lowly architect on the site, I will touch upon just the site plan from a sort of high level before we hand it off to our engineering representatives. But in general, I'll just walk you through the location of the building and its relation to the topography on site. So from a dimensional standpoint, sheet C120, Nassau Street is running left to right at the top of our property or page. South Jefferson runs sort of north-south in the vertical direction here. We're calling site A the larger site because why not give it A if it is the larger site? That project itself is 6 stories, 129 units, also with 129 parking spaces. Site B is, as I mentioned, across the street from site A. Site B is also 6 stories, a bit smaller at 53 units with 53 parking spaces. As everyone's probably aware, the topography here is such that the railroad trestle sort of runs just off page here, and the site slopes downward from right to left in this direction. We can get into the technicalities of that, but by and large, what we're presenting tonight addresses some of those general challenges to the site, and how we're preparing access in and out of the building is something that we've had to deal with great care. At site A, I'll shoot over to the architectural plan because it's a little easier to read. At site A, the larger building, the property sits, or the project sits at the corner of the property. We have lobby access off of Jefferson at grade, of course. There's a small lift to get us up out of the floodplain. As I'm sure we'll talk about at quite length here, there's a bit of flooding on this site. The project is in a floodplain, but we're addressing by sort of lifting the important parts of the building out of said floodplain. So foot traffic comes in off of Jefferson into the main lobby here, up a few steps, and then the lobby communicates with the 2 pair of elevators that feed the upper portion of the building. There's an amenity space off of that lobby, so that amenity space doesn't communicate directly with the ground floor or the sidewalk, I should say, so it's raised a bit. We're up about 4-ish feet, 5 feet to get out of that aforementioned floodplain. We do have some utility access out to the street to get our trash out from this general area to Nassau. And then vehicular access is provided off of Nassau. Nassau comes in, we come up again about 4 or 5 feet and feed what is a raised parking garage. Raised meaning that it's a bit higher than the grade elevation outside. Now, within this parking area, we have 129 parking spaces. A good deal of those are served by mechanical parking stalls. For those familiar faces that I've seen before on this board, the system here is one that's not terribly foreign to your board. This is a automated parking system where residents have the ability to control their parking sort of in a Pez dispenser style. Where, we can get into the nitty-gritty of that should we need to, but in general, this is a system that thankfully has worked very successfully on a few other projects within the city that we've been involved with, and one that's been fairly reliable. So again, mostly, parking at this level and raised out of the floodplain. We have some of the more boring aspects of the project, stairs and utility spaces that are communicating at grade because they need to. These obviously meet the code requirements. Some of this stuff gets lifted out of the floodplain internally, but we're sort of controlling as much stair and ramp access internally so we don't have these sort of eyesores on the exterior of the building. Over at building B, our access to the lobby is at street level. And And that's because the floodplain is sort of drifts off sort of towards this portion of the site. So the entry point to the lobby is at a higher elevation, thankfully. As we walk around the building and down Jefferson, the vehicular access to this parking garage is sort of towards the bottom half of the building. Entering with a vehicle, you go up a ramp, and then you're utilizing a similar parking garage, albeit at a smaller scale. Similar, identical, I should say, mechanical systems for this project, this half of the project as well. 53 parking spaces, 50 mechanical. We also provide the requisite ADA parking spaces and electric vehicle charging spaces. So all of that has been addressed or accounted for. And being that this is at almost a full story below our lobby entry, there's an odd condition where you're sort of entering at a lower elevation beneath this area and then taking an elevator up to the lobby. We don't really need to get into the oddity of that, but in general, we have access from the garage to the lobby. You don't have to leave the garage to get to the lobby. You just take the elevator up a story. And same as building A, the lobby communicates with the parking garage as well. I'll jump over to the next floor plan, which is the second floor plan, sheet A1.20. This is the second floor. It's a little deceiving because these floor plates don't align with one another because of the topography, but by and large, we're calling both of these the second floor. They're not exactly on the same level, but they are the same story. Both of these stories at A and B have a double loaded corridor feeding residential units on both sides of our corridor with a pair of stairs on either end of the corridor. Building A, because of its density and general unit count, has a pair of elevators. And building B has a single elevator, 53 units. That should be plenty for this project. On this second floor, we have an amenity lounge that feeds to a roof terrace, a shared terrace for the residents of this building. That lounge area is about 1,800 square feet. So that's a second amenity for this project. This roof terrace occupies only the second floor. There's no additional rooftop amenity on the upper portion of the project, at least for now. But right now we're utilizing this sort of inner portion of this reverse C-shaped building as our terrace area for amenity area at a roof terrace level. Nothing terribly unique about these layouts. These are traditional 1, 2, and studio layouts. All bedrooms have window access, of course, and all of our living spaces have direct light and air access to windows around all three frontages on our building. Across the way, a similar condition where we have an amenity on the second floor. This one fronts the street. And the purpose here was to sort of enlarge that space. That's about 1,500 square feet. That's going to be a lounge or a gym, and we've discussed maybe sharing amenities across these two properties. But as for now, they have their own dedicated amenities, and should down the road they want to communicate with one another, we could discuss that. But again, nothing terribly fancy about the programming in this regard. We have 22 units on the floor at building A. We have 8 units on this floor at building B. We have a trash chute that feeds a compactor room on the ground floor. All of those residents would have access to the amenity space. The buildings will be fully sprinkled, of course. They will be fully accessible or adaptable, I should say. So we'll meet all of our code criteria. And obviously security is always a point of discussion. These buildings will be littered with cameras and communications to the required authorities. And then floors 3 through 6 are very much the same of what's happening on 2, save for the amenity space that's being subtracted and replaced by a couple of units. So what was once a gym on the second floor is now a triplex of studios. And what was once a lounge on the second floor for building A is a 2-bedroom and a pair of studios. All of these units will have dedicated laundries, individualized control for heating and cooling, so they're not relying on a centralized system for heating and cooling. Every tenant will be able to go into heating or cooling mode throughout the year. And from a programming standpoint, that's generally it. We're looking at some sort of ground floor space at building A with a lounge there, and then on the upper floor a lounge at the second floor, and in building B we have our lounge fronting Jefferson. Architecturally or aesthetically, a very boring rooftop plan. These represent the rooftop condensers. These will not be visible from the street, so these are sort of low-rising equipment. We want the architecture to speak, not necessarily our mechanical systems. And then from a design aesthetic, there was quite a bit of chatter and back and forth, very helpful correspondence with folks at the city, deciding on what a design aesthetic would be for this site. I could bore you with the 2D elevations, and we can come back to them if need be, but I'll just touch upon very quickly. Looking down Nassau, we have the railroad tracks to the left here. So this is looking towards the front of our buildings. So building B is on the left in this case. So still 6 stories, but it seems like it's a little taller than building A, but that's only because it's higher in elevation. Then building A sort of sits a little bit lower on Nassau, and you could see that the street drops off pretty quickly, hence the ability to sort of enter the garage at a lower level elevation for our parking garage, and still enter at a reasonable street level for the lobby entry. Over here at building A, a bit of storefront occupies that corner where that lounge amenity space is, but no pedestrian access. That lobby access is actually coming off of Jefferson, which is represented here. We do have these architectural bays that sort of creep out from the face of our building. This is really to make up for some of the challenges we've had on site to get the layout to work and still meet our parking criteria. We could talk about the merits of this in a bit, but generally we're applying a design aesthetic for the street-facing parts of the project that are attractive. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but are attractive and also represent a housing stock that we're proud of for this general area that may need it. I'll jump back to T100 just to give a little bit more of a.
Can I interrupt you just for one second? And you might be touching upon that, but just for the completeness of the record, because I'm going to say the bump outs, but the encroachments into the right of way has been called out by the planner. But just to be clear, these bump outs do not in any way affect the ground floor areas. There's no encroachment on the ground floor into the sidewalk right of way. Is that correct?
That is correct. To further that point, because of the parking garage condition that we have, these bays are exceedingly raised from the ground floor, or the street level, I should say. You're in the 15-foot-ish range of the underside of these bays. So there's no interaction happening at the ground level. These are raised much higher than we would traditionally see and for a shorter garage elevation. But because of our mechanical systems, our parking garage is a bit taller, thus pushing sort of the building up higher in those bays along with them.
Thank you. So I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Please proceed.
No, drinks on you later.
They always are.
I'll leave us with the pretty picture. This is a sort of a design representation of what we were just chatting about. So there's a bit of communication here with these two buildings, right? There's a bit of a mirroring effect. We're borrowing design cues from either side of the street. There's a play of wood tones. There's a play of brick, some darker and lighter fiber cement panels. What I think I'll highlight briefly is that, these buildings are anchored with a very durable material. Brick is something you see throughout all of our cities, but obviously very much in Orange. That material is something that we're highlighting at the ground level to protect it. At the upper levels, equally as durable and a very popular material in fiber cement paneling, architectural paneling that sort of wraps these facades. And then we're having a little fun with the window placement. As I mentioned, all of the bedrooms and windows will have operable windows and to pour a bunch of light and air into our living spaces. But the sort of regimented, repeated window placement is not something that we wanted to do here. So you'll see a bit of a fun fenestration pattern where we could take advantage of it, where windows don't necessarily align with one another. The purpose here, or the point here, is that these buildings want to kind of create a new hub at this corner, and take advantage of the topography and sort of catch a pretty good vision line. And I think this camera shot sort of does exactly that. You're seeing sort of the street ramp up towards the trestle, which is off camera, and then these two buildings sort of communicate with one another across Jefferson. Reggie, I think that's my spiel.
Yeah, so just one thing, and we will bookend this with the engineering testimony, but again, I just wanted to hit back on the parking. One, because I believe in my intro I might have misstated the amount. I think you stated the amount correctly. So I just want that to be cleared, that we're going to go with your description as opposed to the number that I did. But also, just to be clear, in my intro, I did say that some of one of the problems we're having with meeting the setback is the trade-off with either do that or provide the compliant parking. Correct?
That is right. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
So just to tie that up, am I correct? Is that if we start pushing back and meeting the setbacks, that we are going to be losing the parking and better circulation within the site?
Significantly negatively impacting the overall parking garage. Yes, I think we've programmed the ground floors and the garage as best we can. We've sort of tightened the drive aisles as best we can. We nipped and tucked as best we could, and the layout is what we've developed. And we've obviously had to rely on mechanical parking to make up for the challenges on the site. And I think, should we have adhered to the redevelopment plan requirements for those setbacks, the parking here would be significantly reduced, and you would see a project here that probably couldn't take advantage of the location as best as we are.
Thank you. And in your architectural opinion, is it the better to, and again, I think I'm correct in that the building out to the lines as we are is somewhat consistent with the multi-unit residentials that are either there or are coming online in that area, correct?
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at all of the developments, but on many of our developments throughout the city, we're lot line to lot line. That is accurate. Right.
And is it, in your opinion, a better alternative to provide the parking, the compliant parking, or?
Yeah, I think the redevelopment plan here, and I don't want to get too far out of my purview, but the redevelopment plan here, as I understand it, is geared towards delivering higher density projects in these areas. And should we have sort of pulled the building in, so to speak, a few feet, as you mentioned, the parking takes a hit. And I think if you're looking at projects that are, much fewer in density, we're looking at maybe a 20-unit building and a 40-unit building. I think we're not addressing the desires and intentions of the redevelopment plan.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, that's all the questions I have for Mr. D'Augusta at this time.
And I will open up to any board members that have any questions for Mr. D'Augusta. All right. The only question I have, on this rendering you have on your screen, it looks like the sidewalk kind of like hills and valleys, or slots, chutes and ladders.
Yeah. I think we should have went to Pixar. but we didn't have that in the budget, so we had to handle some of these renderings in-house. So the sidewalk may be a little wonky, but it's going to meet code.
Right.
And there are some drops, but maybe not as drastic as we're representing them.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Member Mobley.
Yeah, my question is, if we look at, I guess the last big storm was Irene. Is that right?
Ida.
Ida. Okay, we look at Ida, which was the last big storm. What was the highest level that the water got to? I don't know if it was 6 feet or 10 feet, but I guess my question is whether or not if we're going to use the electronic apparatus, is the idea that the electronic apparatus is going to lift the cars higher than the highest level that Ida produced?
We'll have our engineers speak to it with a bit more clarity because I'll just fumble through it. But I'm not aware exactly of where the flood line got to exactly. Our design accounts for what the FEMA regulations dictate. So we are in a floodplain. There's a given height that we need to meet. We're better than that. The parking system at one point was ignorant of that. I'll give you that. We were sort of lower than that elevation. So we had to go through a bit of an adjustment here. But to your question, we've raised everything to get out of the FEMA floodplain. If we're realizing or experiencing conditions that don't align with the FEMA map, I think we'll do our best to continue to adjust. But right now, we're meeting the criteria of the FEMA regulations.
All right, it sounds like you understand the context of my question.
Yeah.
So yes, that's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, I think erroneously we're sort of treating this as this was a dry area during a flood seasons. We did have some programming at the lower level, but as I mentioned a little bit earlier, knowing the conditions, we've raised a bunch of that programming out of it and limited what was actually at street level.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Member Foston.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Mr. DaCosta, please, can you explain why the units are so different in terms of measurement? And my second question is because of the architecture, or I don't know, but I see the 2-bedroom, the 1-bedroom, most of them are different measures. And my second question, are you gonna, when the price gonna be on the square feet or on the bedroom? How many bedrooms are there?
I am not qualified or smart enough to know how the unit prices are established. I think frequently they're based upon bedroom. Maybe if the development team wants to speak to that with a bit more care, we can. But to go back to your original question, I think as I'm understanding it, the unit sizes change from a square footage perspective based on the number of bedrooms in them. So every bedroom is 100 to 120 square feet. So you're seeing a big swing from a 1-bedroom to a 2-bedroom, and then within those units, we have some architectural features where we have bays and geometries that create different sized units throughout. So I think depending on where the unit may be placed, and if it's a corner unit, if it's got window frontage on two faces of the unit, that unit is inherently a little bit larger.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. DeAugusta, do you have a layout of a 2-bedroom, a 1-bedroom, and a studio apartment?
I don't, but I can get one if desired, if you give me a few.
Sure. And Attorney Jenkins, is this something that would need to be added as an exhibit, or is it part of the plan?
So forgive me, can you repeat that question again? I apologize.
I'm looking for the layouts of the apartments, the 1 bedroom, the 2 bedroom, and the studio. And Mr. DeAugusta said he can get it. I'm just asking, is this part of the plan that was presented to the board members, or does this need to be an additional exhibit?
This,
And
I think I can answer that. It's
Yes,
not
sir.
included in the current set, so this
Okay.
would be an additional exhibit. Yeah.
Okay.
Give me
Thank
one.
you.
We'll call,
Yep.
when
I have-
Mr. DeAugusta calls it up, we'll call it A1.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
I have a
That was my
question.
holiday present to you, Attorney Wenzel.
If I may, Chair.
Yes, Member Latour.
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Now I like the
Member-
landscape. I like the
Member
hardscape.
Latour?
Hold on, Latour. Hold on. Thought you were asking. Okay, we're gonna wait till he pulls up the
Yeah, well,
renderings of
yeah,
the
why don't-
apartments.
if member Latour can just wait once. Want to close Member Faustin's question before we get to Member Latour.
Okay.
Okay. Give me one moment. I have these ready.
No, I don't have any more question.
No, that was my question. It's fine.
Just want to be sure that whatever is being put up is the correct document to be marked as A1.
Correct.
We can move on to Member Latour's, I'm sure to be very insightful question.
Of course.
Okay, so can we see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. DeAugusta, let me just, before you keep going, let me just ask this question, and Attorney Jenkins will clarify this. What you're showing right here, Mr. DeAugusta, this is not part of a document that was already provided to the board?
That is correct.
Okay, so you didn't provide to the board the unit layouts in this fashion?
Interior layouts we did not provide, no.
Okay, all right.
So this
Okay.
would be a typical layout, typical 1 bedroom layout for a project like this. So we have
Okay.
a shared laundry, a dedicated laundry for every apartment, a dedicated mechanical closet, an accessible or adaptable private restroom or bathroom, and a kitchen. So that's typical 2-bed or 1 bedroom. Let me get a 2 bedroom for you. Okay. And a 2 bedroom is, similar in that regard, where there's a pair of bathrooms, a dedicated laundry, a dedicated mechanical closet, and then bedroom, living room that faces window, and a living room that does the same.
Should we call that A2?
We sure can.
Yep, let's do
Yeah.
that, just for clarity.
Yeah.
And
Wait,
obviously,
wait.
we will provide copies of that to the board.
So that's a master bedroom. Master bath.
That's a primary bathroom. Yep.
Thank you. And then the studio.
Studio. 1 second. Okay, a typical studio could look something like this, where you give one large living area that shares a sleeping area. Again, an adaptable bathroom and an adaptable kitchen area, dedicated laundry, dedicated mechanical closet.
All right, before Member Latour asks his question, I'm going to ask you for the record, are these the renderings of the apartments that are on this in this application?
These would be very similar. They're not identical because those weren't rendered just yet, but these are traditional layouts that we've done numerous times for this client.
But they're not part of this actual application.
They may be different, 5-10 square feet different, maybe.
Okay. All right, thank you.
But they would be substantially similar.
Yeah, I mean, nearly identical in a lot of cases.
Member Latour?
Yeah, no, I had just a quick question in reference to the landscaping. I didn't see any landscape as far as greenery or trees planted in the area. I like the hardscape. I like the architectural design, but I think some tree planting may complement. It may be in the rendering, but I did not see any.
It actually was in the rendering at one point, but I think we were misrepresenting the ability of what we could do at that level. I think the flooding conditions really hurt the viability of plantings at the lower level, at the ground level. There'll be landscaping on the roof terraces to sort of greenify those spaces. At the street level, it's difficult to get trees to kind of operate well, and it sort of detracts a bit from the architecture, if I'm being honest.
And I think you also mentioned, just to follow up, that just the elevation was proposed as far as to remediate some of the flooding. Was there any other measures taken to remediate some of the flooding in the area?
Yeah, so I'm not intelligent enough to speak to the criteria of the flood measures we're taking on the inside of the building, but we do have a significant amount of rainwater and stormwater retention on site. So we have a bunch of underground stuff in both footprints of the building.
And that is the technical term for it, underground stuff.
Double F.
Member Latour, and also just with regard to that question, we could also ask that of our engineer who's going to be coming up, who will be speaking to the stormwater and more of those layouts. Again, Anthony's description was more of the higher level of that.
Maybe too high.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. Thank you, Mr. D'Augusta.
My pleasure.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. D'Augusta? All right, sir. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, at this time, I would like to, there he is, Mr. El Moussi, Sofian El Moussi.
Right here.
All right. Gotcha. All right, Mr. El Moussi, do you swear affirm to tell the truth for this planning board tonight?
I do.
Okay, can you please state and spell your name for the record?
My name is Soufiane El Moussi, spelled Souffiane, last name El, space Moussi. I'm a licensed engineer in the state of New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and a couple others.
Chair, as you may recall, Mr. El Moussi has been before this board numerous times. He's been accepted as an expert, and I'm sure Mr. El Moussi has checked his email to ensure that he is still licensed to practice in the state of New Jersey as of tonight. Chair, I think absent any contest otherwise, Mr. El Moussi should be recognized as an expert in the field of civil engineering.
Civil engineering. All right, Mr.
Thank
El
you.
Moussi, I did see you
Mr. El
nodding your head.
Mr. El Moussi is very civil.
I try.
Mr. El Moussi, I did see you nodding your head that your license was turned. Just for the record, if you can speak that.
Yeah, my license is in my New Jersey professional engineering license is in good standing as of today.
Thank you, sir. And this board will accept you as an expert, and your testimony will be limited to that as a civil engineer.
Perfect. So thank you for allowing me to speak today. I think Anthony kind of gave a solid description of the building itself, the kind of the ground floor site layout. But I'm going to take an opportunity to kind of just discuss the surroundings of the building. I did hear everybody's comments and questions regarding the flooding. I will get to it. But essentially, we're looking at Site A, spanning essentially about, I believe, was 8 lots. And that anchors Nassau Street and South Jefferson. Nassau actually has a quick rise as soon as it extends beyond the South Jefferson intersection, and that's where you'll see that on Site B we have different elevations depending on where you're coming in from the building. But I just wanted to highlight that that we were aware of that, and as part of our design, we really wanted to work with the existing grading and making sure that wherever the access point of the building, it was ADA accessible and also dealt with the flood concerns that we had heard. So from an overall overview perspective, I'm just going to fly through the demolition scope on Site A, which is on the left of the screen, where we're demoing 3 commercial structures, as well as an existing open parking lot. On Site B, it's only an existing parking lot with a single structure at the northeast corner. There is the Morrison Essex Division main line property that abuts our property line. If I'm able to go back to the photos, the aerial view, there's a significant embankment between the rail lines and the catenary lines and that property line. We're building up to this property line, and therefore there's about 15 to 20 feet between our proposed building and where the actual rail lines and their catenary lines exist. So I just wanted to point that out and provide a visual description of that. Moving on to the site layout, I think Anthony highlighted the 2 sites and kind of provided an architectural layout. I'm going to try to focus on the engineering design and kind of start by discussing both the entry points. So for Site A, again on the left, we have the main lobby entrance coming in off of South Jefferson. It's coming in at elevation about 164. There are a few steps that take you to the main lobby, where the 2 elevators are located.
Can I just jump in for just a quick question, just because it's cut off? You're right now on sheet C1
120.
120?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, because
thank you for that.
Just wanted everybody to be clear of what we're looking at. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So as I was mentioning, there's the lobby entrance off of South Jefferson, where you could take a few steps up to the main lobby, where you have access to the 2 elevators. There is a mechanical lift that would take you from the elevation 164 to about 167, where the main lobby is located. There's another entrance. That one is ramped off of Nassau Street, as well as our proposed garage entry. So the intent here, and really the focus of our garage design, has been the flood hazard concerns. So if I'm able to add exhibit A2, which is going to be the flood map.
Actually, we're up to A4.
A4, perfect.
Can we get some clarification? This is clearly not a document which you produced, Mr. Almusi, correct?
That is correct. This is a FEMA flood map that I was able to obtain from the FEMA's website that highlights their definition of flood zones and what they are. So right here,
we have one second, Mr. Almusi. Attorney Jenkins, can we just have clarification as to the date of this document?
Yeah, you beat me to it. I thought you were going to ask those questions. Mr. Almusi, can you just walk the board through when you obtained this, and it's at the bottom of it, but just confirm what the date of this is when you looked at this, and then just you're going through it, but then walk us through what the relevance of this document is, what it shows the board.
Absolutely. So the background map that FEMA is using is based off of USGS national map that's dated 2023. They're not any more specific, but the flood hazard information or contents that's overlaid on top of the map, that was last edited almost that really should have been 18. I think this is their timing is slightly off, but this was actually exported today.
And this was from their website.
This was from FEMA's website, correct?
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. So as you can tell here, our property this is Nassau Street, is right here at this corner. This is site A. I'm gonna try to zoom in a little bit. This is site A, this is site B. So all of site A and a portion of site B are within the flood zone. It's called zone AO. This is a 1% chance of flooding, annual flooding. So essentially there's a 1% chance it floods every year. Though it sounds, I mean, it's a very small percentage from Hurricane Ida and then just these larger storms we've been experiencing. We're seeing that these flood events are more and more common. However, a flood AO is based not on actual flooding within this exact area, but what they call sheet flow flooding. So as you can tell here, this is a floodway where water from upstream flooding zones flows through the city, through Nassau Street and South Jefferson, and makes its way to this floodway, which is an underground river path. So we're not technically within a flood zone that floods itself. It's just that we're in an area that sheet flows and conveys water from a higher upstream area to a more downstream area, and we're right in the middle of it. So as you can tell, the anticipated flood depth based on the FEMA map is about 2 feet, and that's what they define here. So it's somewhat subjective because it depends what the elevation is, but what they do is they provide an approximate idea of, based on the average site of this area, how much flooding we should anticipate, and more importantly, what elevation we should set our ground floor to not experience this potential 1% flood.
Now, before you leave this sheet, for the record, you have made, actually if you can put those lines up.
Sure.
Again, if you can do a screenshot. So we've called this as A4, but I think because it's been altered, we should also then have this as A5, so that if somebody's looking back at the testimony, that line is clear as to what was referenced. Mr. Wenzel, is that okay?
Yeah, we can't have. See, here's the problem. We need a clear A4 and we need a clear A5. We can't have it as A4 and A5.
No, that's what I'm suggesting. We have the A4, which is the clean sheet, the clean, and then the screenshot with Mr. El-Moussy's line drawing will be the A5. So yes,
That's acceptable.
Yeah, two separate clear exhibits.
Sounds good. I will do that right now. So this will officially be A4 with no edits on it, and the other one will be A5 with the edits on it.
Thank you.
Right.
Great.
So going back to the proposed site plan, back to site A. So that is why the lobby is elevated compared to the street grades. We're about at 164. The finished grade here is about 167. I'll show you guys that on sheet C130 that has all these elevations. But essentially, the intent here is to just demonstrate that all of these areas are ramped up to be outside of the flood zone, both on site A, and then I'll go to site B and show you similarly. We also have a transformer room that anchors the northwest corner of the building. The utility room, similarly, You come in and you walk up to the utility room that will also be above the flood elevation. The transformer room, they're flood proof, these transformers, as well as PSNG will not allow it to be raised, so it has to be at grade, which is why we don't propose it to be raised. And along the back, we're proposing 129 parking stalls, of which we have 114 regular parking stalls. These would be the non-mechanical parking stalls that you see in the back, and then I want to be accurate here, 109 mechanical stalls with 19 of those mechanical stalls, including EV charging. So you are used to hearing us present these these mechanical parking systems, 3 levels, one that goes inside a pit, one that's at grade, and one that's elevated above grade. What we're introducing here is also that these mechanical stalls can be set up with EV chargers. And so these chargers actually rest within the platform bay of each charger and not attached to a wall, and so a vehicle moves to it. So obviously you don't plug your vehicle here, it moves 3 stalls over, and now your cable's extending over 3 cars. So these charging platforms come sitting, these charging stations come sitting on the platforms, move with the vehicle. So if someone has an EV vehicle, they'd be assigned that platform and be able to charge their vehicle while it's being stored, whether it be elevated or inside the pit. We are proposing 5 ADA stalls plus 1 ADA van accessible. Out of those 5 ADAs, one of them is electric, an electric charging station. And then we're proposing 2 means of egress. One out to Nassau Street, and then the other one that actually has access to Morrow Street. That's a dead end. But you can see it down on the southwest of the plan. Moving to Site B. So similarly, we have a lobby that's elevated because of the ramped nature of Nassau Streets, as I had shown you earlier. So you're walking in at elevation 173, you walk straight to the elevator bay. However, the parking is on the other side, off of South Jefferson, and that one's closer to 165, elevation 165. So there's an 8-foot difference between the two. So effectively, this could be seen as a lower level parking. You park your vehicle, you walk into the lower lobby, which I'll show you in a second, as we have a separate plan for that. And that's how you access the building. Here we have 53 total stalls. 50 of them are mechanical, of which 8 are EV chargers. And then we have 3 ADA, 2 regular ADA, and 1 van ADA, and that one also is EV equipped. From a site plan perspective, you can either egress the building from the rear and go out to South Jefferson. You have the main lobby to go out on Nassau Street, or you have these additional egress path out to South Jefferson. There's some landscaping in the rear here. This is really just for the tenants, or the residents, I should say. And the landscaping could be proposed with some shrubbery. This would also be a place where someone could walk their dog without having to necessarily go out in the street. And I kind of omitted to discuss that on Site A, but the same logic applies to this rear landscaping area. All right, so moving on to the basement or lower level of Site B. So as you can tell, you can drive in through South Jefferson, come in, park, come into the lower level lobby, which is at elevation 167, come up to 168, and then you take the same elevator that essentially takes you to all the residents above. This, even though we're calling it lower level, is going to be above the floodplain, which if I go to the next sheet, which is C130, there's a lot of content here. I apologize, but I'm going to try to just show you guys the rough grading around these sites. So for Site B, since we just stopped there, the corner is about 165. By the time we make it to the lobby, that's at 173. And then the next space over, which is the transformer room, is going to be at 175. So if the flood elevation or flood zone is in the 164 mark, we're trying to be at least at elevation 167 and above to avoid any flooding entering this building. We have a series of existing city inlets. We have one at the intersection right here, and then we have another 4 on Nassau Street, as well as a 7-foot wide, and yes, 7-foot wide brick storm sewer system that runs down South Jefferson Street. And that's the key thing here is that's our ability to, this is how we're going to minimize the flooding contribution from our sites to this intersection. Because what we're proposing is with a almost lot line building is to carry most of this roof drainage into our storage system. And then based on DEP regulations, which require for the 2-year storm, a 50% reduction of discharge from our sites, a 25% reduction on the 10-year storm, and a 20% reduction on the 100-year storm. We've designed these 2 storm systems below the parking area. And their goal is to essentially capture all this runoff and slowly release it into this 7-foot sewer system. So for reference, Site A can handle up to 24,850 gallons of water at any moment. And Site B can handle a total of 9,500. So we're looking at it roughly 33 to 34,000 gallons of water being stored during these 100-year storm events. And essentially the way we're approaching this is we're trying to capture as much water on our site during these large storm events that potentially would see flooding on Nassau and South Jefferson, and slowly releasing them into the 7-foot sewer system, as opposed to have it as it currently does, which I'm going to go to C-132, which it currently does. It essentially just flows out as just sheet flow off of these parking areas. And same thing with these roofs of these existing buildings are just dumping their water into the street system. Same thing here. This whole site is pitched, I apologize, is pitched. This whole site is pitched to flow out to both South Jefferson and Nassau. And we do believe that this is a major contributor to the very much local flooding here. These are pretty significant sites. I think that between the two, we're a little over an acre of runoff into what is essentially 100% impervious. So any water that falls on these sites is not going into the ground and is going straight out to the streets. So by including the storm system that I just showed on C-130, we're really capturing as much water on our sites during these large storm events, and then slowly releasing it into the system. This is not to say that we capture all of the storm water, keep it on our site until the storm is over. The DEP regulations very much indicate that we're allowed to discharge into the city system, but what we're doing is we're discharging at a slower rate than what it was before, and therefore we're providing a net reduction to our contribution to the likely flooding in this area. From a grading perspective, just to circle back to some of the comments asked before, the street grade at the entrance of our parking is at 162. By the time you go up an 8% ramp, you get to elevation 167, so that's roughly about 5 feet above the street elevation. And that is how we will guarantee that our mechanical pits will not be flood prone, because we'll be waterproofing our building from the outside and essentially not allowing any water coming in from the street into our building. There is no area where water will migrate from the street up 5 feet into our property and then back into those parking pits. So by raising our ground floor parking, we're essentially assuring that any vehicle inside, based on today's flood standards, would never experience it. We're expecting let's say 2 to 3 feet of flooding. We're 5 feet above, so we have a 2-foot buffer before that happens. Similarly, on site B, we're at elevation 165, so we're slightly already above that 162 marker up there. So we're again reaching elevation 167, and using the same logic, these mechanical parking are going to be weatherproofed thanks to the overall elevation difference. This 167 on this side really speaks to the lower level lobby, and then that is essentially this 168 is that lower lobby versus the 177 which is the 78, sorry, which is the ground floor lobby elevation. And that is stormwater. And then from a utility perspective, we're connecting our electric, water, and gas off of Nassau on for both sites. I believe there was one comment from the board engineer regarding tailwater coming in from the flooding into our building. We're proposing to provide a backflow preventer that will allow us to essentially discharge into the storm system. But if the storm system, the storm sewer line is overwhelmed, then none of that water can backflow into our property. We discussed these drainage area maps. These are just maps that we use to demonstrate what was originally sheet flowing out to the streets, what is being captured on the roof of existing structures, and just discharged out using gutter leaders, and versus the proposed, which you can see here, where we're capturing a significant amount of the roof water and conveying it into our storm system. There are a couple areas that are hatched with these diagonal lines. These are free flowing or sheet flowing out to the streets. These areas are accounted for in our calculations, so we do need to restrict what we discharge out of our sites by factoring in all of these areas that don't come into our storm system. And we have, but these are not direct contributors to Nassau and South Jefferson. This is contributing to Morrow Street, and this small patch of landscaping is actually green space and therefore captures some of that water and lets it infiltrate into the ground. Same logic here with DA06, and we're really just talking about these walkways discharging into South Jefferson. Soil erosion, that basic information, and then lighting and landscaping. So lighting, we already have 2 existing street lights, one at each corner of Site B. We didn't want to overwhelm the street with more additional street lighting, so we really just focus on providing lighting at the garage entrance on South Jefferson for Site B, and then at the entrances we have low level 5-foot decorative lighting. So this wall mounted fixture is really going at these locations as well as this one, and this is just going to really be providing added security and safety for the residents, so they can see where their lobby entrance as they're entering and exiting. On Site A, since the street lamps are on the other side, we've provided light fixtures at the lobby on South Jefferson side, some canopy lighting or under the building lighting, under the bays, lighting at the corner of Nassau and South Jefferson, and then one light at the garage entrance to really illuminate the entry, as well as this secondary entry, and a couple more lights for the transformer area. We do provide some lighting at our egress path, so that's where that L3 is at 5 foot high, but really it's just to eliminate if anybody decides to take the stairs, which is definitely the healthier approach here, they'll be able to enter and exit off of Nassau. From a landscaping perspective, we're really not proposing much. I think that we've discussed that due to a few different reasons. One, the sidewalks are not that large, and therefore we're trying to, by placing trees, we're going to limit the mobility or the pedestrian path of travel, which we were hoping not to do. We have a couple green spaces both on the back for the residents to use. This is again for them to walk their dogs or for the kids to play in the back, but really this is not this space is not for the public to be used. And this small landscaping at the bottom is really just a landscaping strip between our proposed building and the neighbors. And I think that's essentially it for me.
Thank you. If I could, first of all, I think it was very important that you pointed out the floodwater net reduction, and I think that is worth being called out and recognized. If you could just go to C 160, sheet 160. because I don't believe you touched upon the traffic circulation, but
That is
if you
correct.
did, the one point, if you could just touch upon that, but then if you would confirm if you agree with the question I asked Mr. D'Augusta, in that with regard to the bulk deviations we're seeking, we are currently providing a compliant level of parking. If we were to pull these in and the sides in and provide a compliant setback all over, do you concur that we would be losing some of our compliant parking and potentially making us non-compliant?
That is correct, and thank you for pointing out that I didn't discuss the traffic plan, but I do agree that we are providing mechanical parking. So for every stall that you see on screen, it really represents three vehicles, ability to park 3 vehicles. And so by pulling back this building, we wouldn't only be losing the number of stalls that you're seeing here, but really that number for example, for these 6 stalls is really 18 parking stalls. So making them compact or making them smaller just won't work with these mechanical systems. They do need to be 18 by 8.5. Normally what we're proposing here are 18.6 by 9 foot. That gives us a clear margin to make sure that these systems are properly installed and the mechanical lifts have enough space so that we can commit to this number of parking stalls. But I do agree with your assessment that reducing the ground floor footprint would significantly reduce the parking count on both sites.
Thank you. And it's your opinion that providing adequate parking for the residents that we are proposing is a better alternative to complying strictly with the setback requirements of the redevelopment plan?
I do believe that is my opinion, that it is a net benefit to have the parking over just having the actual setbacks.
And again, it's not inconsistent with what some of the development that's going on there currently, as well as, throughout the city. Would you agree with that?
I do agree.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions for Mr. Almusi at this time.
And I will open it up to any board member that has any question for Mr. Almusi.
I had a question, Chairman Holmes.
Vice Chair Jones?
Mr. Almusi, I know the engineer made mention of the relocation of the storm sewer piping. I'm not sure if you mentioned that already, but I just wanted you to maybe briefly go over that a little bit.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing it up. So there is an existing stormwater easement, and I will just go back to the original site plan that essentially shows this 12-inch line that runs from Morrow Street to connect into South Jefferson. That is an existing easement. It's a 6-foot wide right of way for storm sewer. And what we're proposing is essentially, in order to vacate and / relocate this easement, what we're trying to do is move it south on plan and closer to this area. So what we're proposing, and I'll go back to the C-130 to show it, is to pick up this existing inlet that would technically have the easement and the 12-inch pipe connecting into the 7-foot sewer, and essentially just bring it straight down. So we would provide that same easement within this landscaping area by simply running a new pipe from this inlet to a new inlet proposed here, and then run a new storm sewer line to connect into the 7-foot storm sewer. So we're not really, the relocation is very minimal in terms of where it used to be to where it now is proposed, but we obviously wanted to make sure that connection remained, and for us, this is the easiest way to ensure that Morrow Street still discharges onto South Jefferson.
So this will require another easement or no?
Correct. We would have to vacate the original easement and then put on the deed the updated easement.
Okay.
Anything from any other board member for Mr. Almusi? Mr. Amusi, thank you for your testimony, sir.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, while we are just, although not directly connected, but while we're talking about easements, one thing I did want to point out is when we were talking about the encroachments, those overhangs into the right of way, that is something that can be addressed as the city and as this board has approved in other applications, where obviously if this is approved, one of those conditions of approval would be that we enter into an appropriate agreement with the city to allow for that overhang. So be it an easement, be it an air license, but one way or the other, it would be subject to the appropriate agreement with the city. So I just wanted that to be put on the record as our understanding, and we would obviously consent to that at the appropriate time, if that were a condition.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any other witnesses?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking for any further questions of the board. At this point, I don't have.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just one of the board members? I'm sorry.
I'm just a community member. I don't know.
Okay, you have to, there's a portion that the community will
Oh,
have an
sorry.
opportunity, so just be patient. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilwoman Neeson.
I just want to go back. What type of security system is he having in these buildings?
Attorney Jenkins, is one of your witnesses like to address that, or you want to save it for the applicant representative?
I mean, I can jump back
can
in
you
now,
please?
Reggie,
Yeah.
but
Someone
essentially,
mentioned it earlier.
correct. So
Yeah.
I'm just going to repeat what Anthony said, unless Anthony wants to jump in.
I'm here. I could jump in.
Yeah, please.
So, similar to previous applications that Sufjan and Mr. Jenkins and I have been a part of, with this type of rental multifamily project, the security is obviously a primary concern. So we'll have cameras throughout the project, both interior and exterior. So it's generally no common area. We'll have a blind spot. We'll have vision on all the volumes and areas throughout the project. Sorry. In addition to that, those cameras would relay to a centralized recording system, and that system would be tied to whatever central bank that the ownership team deems necessary.
So that gonna be directed to the police department?
It could be, sure.
Okay.
And there will also be a super on site, correct?
Yes, a full-time super on site.
Correct.
24 hours?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, any other, no, we're gonna move forward. Attorney Jenkins, do you have
Thank you.
anyone else?
At this point, those are our two primary witnesses, and I can stop there, and we can open up to your professionals as well as any public comments that may be raised.
All right. It looks like Della Rosario wants to chime in. I don't know.
Hi, everyone. Oh, I'm just, oh, sorry.
Wait. Let's hold on. Okay. All right. So Mr. Jenkins has indicated he does not have any other witnesses.
Okay, I apologize.
I believe Ms. Del Rosario, if Mr. Jenkins, Ms. Del Rosario is one of the people on your ownership team, correct?
Correct. As I mentioned, she's a representative. If there were questions, she was here to answer, but I was not calling on her at this point.
Okay,
Okay.
I stand corrected.
We're gonna hold Ms. Del Rosario in reserve in case there's questions. So, Chair, once again through you, now that Attorney Jenkins has indicated those are the end of his witnesses in chief, Shall we go to our board professionals?
We are going to move to our board professionals. And Mr. Hazel, it's a pleasure to see you. Love the smile.
All right, Miss beaming smile. Mr. Hazel, do you swear affirm to tell the truth before this planning board?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll try to keep this as brief and succinct as possible. Let me just start off with one of the let's just start off with the issues that I'd raised in my report. Let's start with the setbacks. I understand from the testimony provided that the setbacks are really being driven, the lack of setback, I should say, primarily being driven in an effort to try and get as much parking in as possible. While I am not, opining one way or the other, whether that's a good idea or not a bad idea at this point, I just wanted to be very clear to the board that the parking is also a function of the number of units in the building. If one wanted to get less parking in, they'd have less units, and thereby would give you the ability to have a little more space. So the setbacks are a function of the size of the building, the density of the building, the number of units. So it's not an either or. If you get rid of the setbacks, then if you try to put setbacks, you're gonna have to lose parking. There is another area at which you can adjust to reduce parking, and that's to reduce the number of units. I think it's important that the board understands that. Secondly, another area that's very near and dear to my heart that didn't fare very well is the landscaping. Again, the landscaping is I happen to think that is an extremely important component, not just of the project in and of itself, but because of the environment around it, the neighborhood around. And so this has much more of an impact on that, more so than, and I shouldn't say more so, just as much as it may have on the building itself, it has an impact on the neighborhood. Let's not get in even to the environmental impact on a much larger scale. So I really would like to see, and I would implore the board to recommend, even as a condition of approval, that some additional landscaping is provided. Again, the setbacks, one of the functions I think of having no setbacks is that it reduces the area in which any type of plantings can be put. And again, as I said before, that is a direct function of the size of the building and the number of units being proposed. So landscaping can be put in if and when setbacks are put in, and that can be done if and when the number of units are reduced. That's entirely up to the applicant. I also wanted to talk about the architectural elements that do impede, that do go into the public right of way. I'll defer to the Mr. Winsel's brilliant legal mind to correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't, based on other applications similar to this that we've seen, I don't believe the board has the ability to approve a variance into the right of way. That's something in the purview directly of the mayor and council. And so this board cannot approve those encroachments into the right of way. So that's something that will also need to be dealt with. I think those were the main things, were the main concerns that I had. I just wanted to clarify, because this was driving me nuts. In one of the in the elevations that were provided by the architect, especially on the Nassau Street frontage, is the entrance to the ingress egress to the parking, is that shown? Because that was throwing me off a lot. I don't know if you can put it up or not, but on the ingress to egress to the parking garage on that frontage of building of site A, I could not seem to find that ingress egress on the elevation. Is it me, or is it missing, or could you clarify that for me?
It's there. I'd like to share, but I think Ms. Reyes, I think that I lost the ability to share.
Mr. Hazel, is that a architect issue, or is that a?
I thought it was architectural because
That's okay. Thank you.
yeah.
So, Mr. I'm sorry.
It's okay. D'Augusta.
Augusta, thank you.
No worries. So just so I'm clear, Jerry, you're asking, are we showing the parking garage entry onto the building A?
Specifically on the elevation, yes.
It's not showing up. Yeah, you're correct. It's not showing up. I think it's more of a printing issue.
All right, yeah, I just want to make sure because I thought I was
Yeah.
kind of losing it. So
No, you haven't lost it.
all right, so I think those are the issues that I had that were my burning issues. So I don't think I have anything else. Oh, one other question, and this is for Mr. Almusa. The easement that you're talking about moving further to the south, the pipe for the drainage easement from Morrow. I noticed that it seemed to have been a straight shot, straight out, and you're talking about putting some little, putting a curve in it, a change in the right angles in it. Does that impact the flow of that? Does that impact the flow at all, or I don't know? I'm not sure what those junctions actually do if it does facilitate movement.
These
but
are inlets. They capture water flow that essentially would comes to the dead end of Morris Street. These were existing. So adding this segment of pipe is essentially, I think we're talking about get you the right number for accuracy. About 29 foot of piping. It does add the piping length, but in terms of its functioning, its ability to do its job, which is to pick up the Morrow Street flow and take it to the storm sewer, this little jog will not have a significant impact that would be quantifiable.
Okay.
We'd have to maintain the grading and maintain that the pipe remains sloped, and we'd obviously do that.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to clarify that in my mind. Mr. Chair, I don't have any other questions. Any other?
Mr. Chairman, can I make two responses?
Yes.
One, with regard to the landscaping, we would absolutely revisit that. As we said, it had been looked at, but removed. But again, we can obviously revisit that, and we have no problem doing that and working with your professionals to install that. Secondly, with regard to the encroachments, I agree with Mr. Hazel, and I hope the board didn't misinterpret what I was saying in terms of the approvals. I was saying as a condition of approval, we would have to go to the mayor and council for that encroachment, agreement, be it by easement, be it by an air license, but that is the purview of the council, not of the planning board. So I was not asking for you to grant that per se, but that would be just like we would have to go for other permitting. That would be another requirement that we would be looking for in terms of that's effectively another approval that we need for that aspect of the project.
Okay, yeah, I only raise it because, and I did understand it, Reggie, but I only raise it because I know, again, this is something we've seen before. And essentially what the board, to follow that scenario, as you pointed out, what the board would be essentially voting on would be a building that technically does not look like what is before for them to vote on. They would be voting for a building without those encroachments, with the intent that down the line, the mayor and council can approve such encroachments. But I think it's just important that the board understands that essentially, if they were to go forward with that intent, that what they're voting for is not what is being presented here. The building is not going to appear as, in other words, what you're looking at is not what it's going to look like unless and until such time it is approved by the council.
I respectfully disagree. And I think that's actually at odds with what this board has done previously. What we're asking for is to have, you are approving what is before you, subject to that condition. So for example, it would be like any other condition. So yeah, we're asking for this, and we are going to the council for the permission to encroach into the right of way. If the council then comes back and says, we are not granting that, then we have to come back with a different facade of the building. But my understanding has always been that, and the practice has always been that we're asking for this building to be approved, subject again to XYZ conditions.
Well, I mean, my understanding is that the encroachment itself is a deviant condition. It's a deviation from the bulk standards which this board is required to adjudicate. And by virtue of it being encroaching into that right of way, and the board having it as a condition of approval, essentially the board is basically approving that encroachment and basically having the governing body sort of rubber stamp it, so to speak, or to consider it as well. But once it leaves here, what is being presented as part of the building, the site plan, etc., is with that encroachment. And in that case, I think one would also have to provide the necessary justification under the MLUL to justify having those elements in the encroachment. And I'm not sure if that's being provided tonight by the applicant, but I personally, in my opinion, feel it's problematic. Because I have not heard any need and justification for it other than something that might be more aesthetic, and which is fine, but it should be presented in that way and not just sort of kind of this is what it is and we will get permission for it.
Now, at this point, I defer to Mr. Wenzel because I've said my piece, although I do believe, particularly with the justification, you put hit the nail right on the head, is that it is in large part an aesthetic question. But again, go ahead, Mr. Wenzel. Again, you've heard the competing positions.
So here's where this comes down to, okay? And some basic points. Number one is that I think everybody's in agreement the planning board cannot give an approval for someone to build something outside their lot lines. Okay, that's number one. Number two is that in this set of circumstances, this is an encroachment into the right-of-way which is held by the city, which means that the applicant, if it wants to secure that encroachment, it needs to convince the city that encroachment is appropriate. And they would have to, if they were to do that, they would have to provide in resolution compliance proof that the encroachment was approved and whatever the parameters of that encroachment are. Furthermore, as Attorney Jenkins indicated, if the right-of-way was not allowed to be encroached, the applicant would be bereft of that portion going into that area and would, in such circumstances, may have to come back, depending on the extent of it, may have to come back on an amended application. That being said, this board can, as it has in prior occasions, can say We have reviewed the application. We have reviewed the nature of the request by the applicant for the encroachments, and that we leave it as an express condition of approval that the applicant seek that out from the city. And if they're unable to obtain it, that the applicant would have to return because there would be potentially significant change in the plan. There are already the portion, I believe the portion of the building where the encroachments are occurring already violates the setbacks. So that would be, in essence, the board's already considering that. So the board would not be approving, and Mr. Hazel's entirely right, the board cannot approve the encroachment into the right of way, but the board can tell the applicant to go to the city subject to the risk that the applicant is undertaking is the city says no, because then they would have to come back. It's a risk that the applicant takes, quite honestly. And the board is not, like I said, there would be nothing in the actual resolution saying the board approves the encroachment. We could never do that. So there is a halfway point at which we can go this far and no further, and then the applicant takes the risk.
And I would agree with that, Mr. Chairman.
That was Attorney Wenzel.
Can I just a clarification, Joe?
Yes.
So in your opinion, just as the applicant would have to provide a justification for not having a setback, would the applicant have to provide any form of justification as to why the encroachment is, or is that something that would be made solely?
No, that's, and thank you for reminding me of that, Mr. Hazel. Yes, I believe that it is appropriate that the applicant provide testimony to the point of the reason for the encroachment, because there has to be there has to be an acknowledgement that the encroachment is going to be asked for, right? So we need to know why you have to ask the city for the encroachment. So I would suggest that after Mr. Hazel's done with his commentary, that perhaps before we get to Mr. Callahan, who's I know itching to talk, but perhaps before we get to John, maybe Mr. Jenkins, if you want to recall either your architect or your engineer to address Mr. Hazel's point, I think that would be appropriate.
If that's the
Through you, Chair. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
You're absolutely right. Yes, I concur.
Okay, Mr. D'Augusta.
Okay, so Mr. D'Augusta is being recalled. They're still under oath. Where is he?
I'm here.
Okay, yeah, couldn't see on my Hollywood squares. Okay, he's down there. All right, okay, Attorney Jenkins. Through you, Chair, Mr. D'Augusta is going to be recalled to only respond to Mr. Hazel's point about the encroachments, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. D'Augusta, you are still under oath.
Thank you.
So yeah, you've heard the questions. Could you respond to that with regard to the justification for why we are seeking those encroachments? You've touched upon it previously in your direct testimony, but if you can expand on that, if you can.
Sure. I think I'd refer to the redevelopment plans general memorandum and intentions, and I think highest and best use of the site as a multifamily development with the appropriate density is, in my opinion, what was drafted in that redevelopment plan, and then furthered by its increase in parking density for the project. I think without those general framework, we may have a much less dense project and not hit those targets that are illustrated in that redevelopment plan. And I think if we adhered, and as I mentioned earlier, if we adhered to the requisite setbacks on our frontages and rear yards, I know that the parking would take a significant hit. I acknowledge Mr. Hazel's commentary regarding the parking is driven by the density of the project, and therefore fewer units would result in fewer parking spaces, or the need for fewer parking spaces, and thus maybe pulling the building in would be achievable. But I think for a project of this stature and one that's trying to meet the merits of the redevelopment plan, the appropriate zero setback is what we've delivered. And as far as the encroachments, those are more architectural in nature, and we could review how they could be addressed.
Thank you. Again, I just reiterate that again, this, and I think it's important, my role is to serve as a resource to the board and advise the board, and I advise them, as I said before, the setbacks that are being attributed, the lack of setback that is being attributed to the plan and to the intent of the plan, etc. I put to you that basically that is taken into account when designing plans like this. The project has the ability to adjust up or down its density, its size. Okay, the setbacks are guidelines set that all projects must follow. If the applicant deems it necessary to eliminate the setbacks so they can accommodate the building at the size and scope that they're proposing, that is entirely up to them. That is not the intent of the plan. There's a project right around the corner that was built within those same parameters, with setbacks, with landscaping. So I just advise the board to keep that in mind. This is not a trade-off between if you want the parking, then this is what you have to have. It's not an either or. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. Before we get to Mr. Cahalan, can I just have 5 minutes? Can we or even a 3-minute pause?
Sure, take a 3-minute pause.
Sure.
Attorney Wenzel, we have to vote on this.
No, we can. You can do it through your office. Take a 3-minute upheld in abeyance. Nobody log off.
Please.
Everybody stay on.
Yeah.
But please keep yourself muted.
3 minutes.
Yep, thank you. I apologize. Okay, I'm back whenever you are.
Chair, I'm sorry. Just give me 1 second here.
No problem. Take your time. You still had 30 seconds.
Oh, then I'm going to do another lap.
Be flexible, Chair. Just give me 1 second.
Absolutely.
Okay, Chair. I think I was just trying to clear something up. Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to wait till I see all the lovely faces.
So when you're ready, Mr. Chairman, I would like to, and again, before we get to Mr. Cahalan, I'd like to address something to the chair. So whenever you're ready.
Madam Secretary, are we set to go?
We're set.
Chair, let's just I'm
Let's
sorry,
finish
Chair.
up with board members.
Through you, Chair, I just want to be sure that we have all of our board members returned. So all the board members should, if you've returned to your screen, please turn on your video so we know that everybody's here.
All right. And looks like we're all present.
So
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You set? All right, Attorney Jenkins.
thank you very much. So I wanted to put this out, and either before we get to Mr. Cahalan, or if we can go, after this. But I think, given some of the points that Mr. Hazel has brought up, I would request that we adjourn to the next hearing. One, because you've seen me before this board. I'm not here to just kind of plow anything through and snow anybody and just get an answer. When questions that are potentially significant come up, we like to answer them. And I think that rather than do it in a half-baked way, this applicant would like the opportunity to come back with a bit more of a concerted response to what Mr. Hazel has stated.
So that's it.
And again, I don't know if Mr. Cahalan has any additional disagreements or substantive questions with regard to any of the engineering. But if there's anything that was outstanding, obviously we'd be addressing those too. So I don't want to cut him off in that. But at some point, I would like, given what I deem is important questions, this applicant would very much and strenuously request that this be adjourned to allow us to address those, in a proper fashion.
Chair,
Attorney Wenzel.
Chair, through you, let me just clarify a couple pieces with Attorney Jenkins, just so that we can have this set up properly. Attorney Jenkins, when you reference adjourning it, meaning to the next scheduled planning board date, which I would give out tonight, so that any interested parties that are on would know and would obviate the need for you to renotice. Is that your intention at this time, Attorney Jenkins, to be put on for the next meeting?
That is exactly my intention, and I thank you for that clarification.
Okay, so that being, let's stop there, and then I have an additional point. Ms. Reyes, what is our next date?
January 22nd. 2025.
25.
Okay. All right. So, Attorney Jenkins, is that date, January 22nd, good for your team?
Lock it in.
Okay, it was very quick. All right. The second point is that, and I know Attorney Jenkins is a very thorough person. If there are going to be any amendments to the plans, they need to be provided to Ms. Reyes in advance so that we have those. I know, Mr. Jenkins, you're going to have all that done in case.
Correct.
So,
we will also
I
supply,
know.
we will also supply the marked exhibits that were introduced this evening.
Okay, all right. Now, I've completely walked all over Mr. Callane, but he's sitting there so nice and quiet. I just, but I'm going to suggest, and it's up to John, but I'm going to suggest, I don't think we know what exactly may change, if anything at all, on the applicant's submission. So I would probably suggest it would be best for Mr. Callane to wait for his input until that time, unless Mr. Callane feels different. That's my suggestion, Chair.
And if I could also say, tonight's my wife's birthday, and I'm here. So if Mr. Callane wanted to, hold anything like that so I can get home to cake. I'm just saying that is not in any way, for dispositive thought, but,
Mr. Callane.
Good evening, everyone. Appreciate you. I'm in agreement with Attorney Wenzel. I can hold off until the next meeting rather than bifurcate my testimony. And I am also certainly not someone to hold anyone back from cake. So,
yes, and we're lucky that this is being recorded so that my wife knows exactly where I am. So, but but overall, I think that is the better course for the board to actually have a full and complete picture of this application.
So, Chair, with regard to that, if I can, through you, make the statement that the applicant has requested, there is no board action necessary. This is the applicant's request. It's his application. And they have requested to pause their testimony at this time, take in the commentary by Mr. Hazel and others, and determine what, if anything, they're going to do. They will be back before the board on January 22nd, 2025. So this announcement is the notice. There is no need by the applicant to renotice. So I am sure that there are many people on here who are interested in this application. They should know that they should return on the January 22nd, 2025 session. And at that time, the applicant will be back and proceed forward. And at that time, they can then, assuming that we get through the application, the public comment period will then be open. So everybody on that date. And Attorney Jenkins, just for the record, your client is waiving the time for the planning board to render a decision, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So with that, Chair, I believe that is the appropriate method going forward.
So what I hear you saying, Attorney Wenzel, is that case number 24-11, Vita Capital LLC, 538-544 Nassau Street, will be adjourned until the January 22nd meeting.
You said it perfectly.
Love it when the plan comes together.
If I may, Chair,
Mr. Chair,
Member Latour, and then Councilwoman Eason.
I will defer to Councilwoman Eason first.
Councilwoman Eason.
boy, what a gentleman. Chivalry is not dead. So that I understand, and I guess right now I am trying to figure out. So, what is it? And I don't know if the board is confused as I am, that Mr. Jenkins is going to go back and take a look at. Can we do the project without encroaching on the right of way? Is that the piece? Because I'm trying to understand that we do have a technical review board, and while some of these issues wasn't ironed out during the technical review, so that when we came here tonight there would be no questions. So did I miss something?
I think during the testimony, the way it was presented, the board planner had feelings, if you will, issues with
But
the
I
way it was
understand all
presented.
that. That's not my issue.
With that, I think the applicant is going to look at their application to reconsider their plans.
If I can, Chair, to try
Attorney
to
Wenzel,
answer
please.
Councilwoman Easton's question. Yes, we have a very robust technical review committee that Mr. Hazel, Ms. Cowlane, I, and others participate in. The technical review committee, at the end of the day, is really a tool for the applicant to use so that they can be aware of what the potential concerns are. It does not serve as a means to tell them what to do, but merely suggestions on what the areas of concern are. The applicant is free to take any or none of the suggestions, and the applicant can then proceed, because it's their application, right? At the end of the day, if they wish to take the suggestions, they can take the suggestions and move on. They can not take the suggestions. It doesn't mean the applicant is being disrespectful or the applicant is doing anything wrong. The point of the TRC is to effectively reduce the number of issues. But that doesn't mean that the applicant is beholden to do as maybe the TRC group has suggested. So the applicant is free to then make the appeal to the board. I think and by the way, I think it's appropriate under the circumstances for the applicant to say, maybe I need to look at this and sharpen my pencil and have my people look at it and see what else can be done. That's not inappropriate. But yes, Councilwoman Easton, just to respond to your question, the TRC committee did meet. We did provide input, and obviously the applicant can proceed how they wish to proceed. And they're not being
Mr. Winston,
bad or rude by doing that. That's just how they choose to do it.
Right.
Mr. Winston, you are an excellent attorney, but I still Mr. Hazel raised some questions, and I'm assuming he's part of that technical review committee.
He is.
Should have.
And I'll leave it to him on my square to answer that question.
That I feel should have been raised during the technical review, so that when we got here tonight, we wouldn't have, all of this going back and forth, and that could have been addressed at that time. So when the applicant came before us, because I don't understand, because I would assume if he went before the council, I'm not so sure that he would still have to go back to the drawing board and redo it. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I was the one that recommended the technical review board before, because so we didn't have to go back and forth on all of these things. That's why it was set up in the first place. So I was just asking that question as to why Mr. Hazel didn't raise those questions then. And so they could have been addressed. And Mr. Hazel, I'm not throwing you under the bus. I'm just asking a question because I'm a little confused, that's all.
Yeah, I can't add any more to that other than Mr. Wenzel, Attorney Wenzel said. This is, the role of the TRC is not to decide the application then. It is to the opportunity for the board to hear and mostly technical issues. And, the applicant has his right to bring the application as they want before the board. And, they also got a copy of my report, so they had an opportunity to sort of know that this was a concern expressed, so they can deal with it in the best way they see fit. But I do believe that the TRC process has worked well, because this is, as I always say when I give my review, my testimony before the board, this is the net result of that. In other words, sometimes what you see here is totally different than it started out, and this is kind of where we end up. So I don't think this should take anything away from that process, but it's just there are times when it kind of comes to this.
Okay.
All right, with that.
If I may, Chair?
Welcome, Member Latour, yes.
Yeah, my question is in the same light. I don't want to hold you to your cake, but I just want to. It should be a quick answer, but as far as clarity and the concerns, I think the concerns that Mr. Hazel brought into light. One of them that I think you were amicable to, but I want to make sure that you also consider that the landscaping that I believe you were amicable to it, and you're going to review that as well.
Correct.
All right. Enjoy your cake.
Thank you. I bought it last night and I snuck it in the house so she didn't see it. So.
Then we're not going to hold you up any longer. With that said, this application has been adjourned until January 22nd.
But I thank you very much all for your courtesy.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Enjoy your wedding anniversary.
Thank you. And we won't be speaking, so please, everybody have a wonderful holiday season.
Yes, you do the same. Be safe out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
You too.
And with that, we are moving the agenda to, is there any unfinished business? Is there any new business?
Mr. Chair, I provided the proposed meeting dates for next year for the board's review. If there's any questions, we can address them now if that's okay. Attorney Wenzel, I'm good. Go ahead.
Chair, I'm going to ask for an opportunity between now and January to sit down with Ms. Reyes about meeting dates. So let me, if the board would be so kind as to allow me to do that, Ms. Reyes, because I think we need to work out a little bit. Just want to make sure that I don't have conflicts is what I'd like to do. I enjoy being here so much. I don't want anything else to be in the way of spending time with one of my favorite boards, even including Mr. Latour. So if that's so if Ms. Reyes can forward me that list of
It's in
dates.
Dropbox, no worries, you have it.
Really? Okay. I trust when
Also, Ms.
I trust everything Ms. Reyes says. I'll look at it.
Also, Ms.
I'll
Reyes,
look.
can you forward to me on my email and not in the Dropbox?
Understood. No worries. Special request
Yeah,
for the review.
look, there's some of us that, we didn't pay, you didn't look all the way deep into the Dropbox, Ms. Reyes. I'm sorry. We'll be more inquisitive next time. Councilwoman Easton and I will be on the same computer.
It's complicated.
We'll work it through together, Councilwoman.
All right.
All right. So Chair, if we could just obviously the board can still provide commentary, but I'm gonna be reaching out to Ms. Reyes in particular
And if any board member has any questions, then you can always email Ms. Reyes with your questions or concerns. And so that when we do come together to discuss it, everything is clear and everybody's on, at least in the same park. It's reading the same book. All right.
All right.
Ms. Reyes does her due diligence, as well as all other board members, and I appreciate it, including our experts. That's why we pay them so well. If there's no other new business, I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion from Councilwoman Neeson. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second from Member Foston. Are there any questions on the motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and that we all stay safe and healthy and live life as if it is our last, each day as if it was our last.
Oh, so this is the time that we're supposed to make these kind of comments, huh? Okay, I got it now.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Everyone, please enjoy your holidays, be safe,
Everybody to your
and I
home.
look forward to seeing you all next year.
Happy holidays all.
All in favor of
Happy
adjourning,
holidays.
say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
Bye.
Is there anyone that opposes adjourning this meeting at 9:49 p.m.? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.